All right, everyone, welcome to our Wild Fit Seasons and Food Categories Workshop. Now, the big reason that I am hosting this workshop is I know that some of you are here for review. Some of you're like, I was kind of ebbing and flowing with Wild Fit, and now I really want to get structure. And many of you are just coming out of the Wild Fit Challenge, and you really want to know what we are moving into. So it can be kind of a little bit counterintuitive because we move through Wild Fit and we ask you to trust the process and really figure out what's right for you. And we don't give you a lot of structure, right? We give you enhancements, but you are meant to find your own ebb and flow and figure out what works best for you. And now suddenly week 13 hits and you have food categories and you have seasonal ratio, and it all comes to be about numbers and math. And some people get like, whoa, I don't really understand. This feels a little bit constricting. And I thought this was all about freedom. And sometimes it can be difficult to connect the dots and figure out how having this structure and having your logistics in place actually sets the tone for more freedom. So that is what we are going to be discovering today. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation, if I can find it, and we will get rolling. So as I was, oops, I can't minimize. I don't want to minimize. As I was saying, when you are coming in, I know some of you are just getting settled here and getting ready to go. So what I would love to hear from you is, what is the thing that's most confusing to you about your food categories and about your seasons? Or what are you most looking forward to learning? Because if I know that, then I'm better equipped with my speech as I move forward to know what I need to talk about. So please do put those in there, and away we go. Can everyone see my screen here? I don't know if I can present.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. I don't know if I can present. There we go. I just needed a minute. And now I'll move you all over here, and that should be perfect. So we all know why we're here, and hopefully you all know who I am. I am a Wild Fit Master Coach. I've been doing this for a number of years and have helped most of you personally through your Wild Fit journey. So these are just some things that I picked up for myself in my own journey, and what I believe is the most important tips and tricks for creating your own seasonal ratios to continue moving towards your goals and to set up your categories in a way that allow you the amount of freedom that you want, and also the ability to have some experiments and continue to have fun with food, because that's what it's really all about. So that being said, here's what we're going to do today. We have about 90 minutes that we're going to share together, and then I'm going to leave the room open. So for anyone who wants to continue creating their food categories and their seasonal ratio in their calendar and not leave until you're done, you're going to have a good amount of time to do that. And I'll also be sure to answer all of your questions. So for now, please just try to absorb the information that I'm giving you and make note of your questions so that we can come back to it when it's time for the Q&A, all right? So as I was saying, when we think about Wild Fit, the whole idea is to have a good amount of food freedom so that if you go to dinner, you can order what you want, or if you go to a party, you can eat what you want. And we really want to be minimizing the amount of dialogue which is happening, because the more dialogue that we tend to have, the more opportunities there are for our food devil and our sugar monster to get in our way and put in their arguments. However, when we cultivate very clear seasons and we understand our food categories, and we go through all of the for instances when it comes to these foods in these occasions with these ingredients, That amount of absolute clarity helps us to say, not right now. Because if we know that we are in spring, so right now, cheesecake, not necessarily appropriate for meeting our goals, but we're moving into fall 2 weeks from now, and maybe at that point we want to experiment with cheesecake. It's going to be a lot easier to say, no, thank you, I'm choosing not to eat that, instead of feeling like we are missing out. The more often we feel like we're missing out, the more we wear down our willpower battery. And the smaller our willpower battery becomes, the easier it is to just give in to food and then start this cascade of feeling badly about ourselves and feeling like we're not meeting our goals. So today, we want to get that amount of clarity. So I'm going to review what the Wild Fit seasons are, what they're meant for, what the food categories are, what they are meant for. And then we're really going to get into creating our seasons and seasonal ratios and food categories to match your individual goals. Whether you are here to continue releasing fat, whether you are here to start building muscle, whether you are here to build a really healthy body to get ready to have a baby, it's all good. You are an individual, and we want to be able to cultivate your specific seasons and ratios to meet your needs. And then, of course, we want to make it easy and seamless to move in between our seasons so that there's not that sticking point of fear as we're moving into summer from spring, or regret, or almost like a niggling, I don't really want to do this, when we're moving from summer or fall into spring. So we want to be really excited about our transition no matter what season we are moving into. So when it comes to our 4 Wild Fit seasons, we call them by the names of the natural seasons because they're representative of what nature is doing at that point in time. When we are in spring, we are trying to reset our metabolism. We are trying to release fat, and we are mostly just trying to bring our body back into a state of balance. Spring is a really good time for balancing our sex hormones and our appetite hormones, and for lowering that set point. So if you've been dieting for a really long time and you've been spending a lot of time just exercising as hard as you can and struggling to eat the least amount possible in order to reach your goal, as you've experienced, moving into spring is a really good way to eat in abundance and not have a huge appetite, and at the same time your metabolism goes up. Spring is also a really important season for healing. So if you are recovering from surgery, if you are trying to get over a chronic illness, this is a really great season to be spending time in as your base season. Summer is for rejuvenation, right? That's when nature is starting to come alive. So if you are already a category 1 or a category 2 where you only have maybe 1 or 2 niggling symptoms that are still coming up, or you're getting pretty close to your goal weight, or you only have 1 medication you'd like to let go of, maybe summer is going to be a good base season for you. Perhaps for you, especially if you're a female, this communicates abundance. And abundance is a state that we really want to be communicating to our body. I know some of you, you were in spring and your body just wouldn't release the fat that you were looking to. And then as soon as you moved into week 11 and you felt like you were able to have berries again and some root vegetables, suddenly it was like your body collectively had this big sigh of relief because you were now able to have these colorful foods. And then something clicked and you started to release. So perhaps for you, summer is going to be a really good base season. Now, if you've read your notes, you know that your base season is the place where you are always going to come back to. This is your anchor season. So if you are like, I really want to be releasing fat, I feel really good in spring, then whenever you hit one of those points where it's like, I've gone off course, I've lost my trajectory, I was in a cascade, I'm not really sure where I want to be. Boom, you land in spring and spend some time there while you're getting your footing. If you are category 2 and you're very close to your goal, category 1, maybe you feel like summer is a really good base season. So you're spending some time in spring, you're spending some time in fall, but you're spending the balance of your time, most of your time in summer. Summer is also a really good season if you struggle with depression or anxiety, because it's really good for balancing your brain chemistry, your mood hormones. It's really great for giving you beautiful skin, for improving skin tone. If you've already released a lot of fat, sometimes it's nice to spend some time in summer so you can tighten up your skin and get that really beautiful glow before going back into spring. So here we're just talking about places where you can land for the majority of the time. Fall, that is our season of restoration. That's when a lot of fruits and vegetables come into season, right? They're all ripe and they're ready to be consumed. So this is our season if we're looking to build. Maybe you've gone through your Wild Fit Challenge and you're like, okay, I've got more energy. And now that I have this energy, I'm going to go and I'm going to start lifting up some heavy things, building up some muscle, changing my body composition. Well, you're not able to build muscle tone without a certain amount of carbohydrates and a certain amount of water in your muscles. So if you're going to be building, then you need to be spending a good amount of time in fall. Building phases are also if you're a growing child or if you're a teenager, if you have kids who are doing Wild Fit with you, their base season is largely going to be fall. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, fall is also a beautiful time to have as your base season where you're spending the majority of your time. Vegans also thrive in fall because there are so many plant foods that are available to them. So it really communicates abundance. Now, again, this doesn't mean that you're spending all of your time in any one of these seasons. It just means that the balance of your time is going to be here. So you anchor yourself into one of these seasons, and then you color your calendar with shorter seasons of summer and spring, or fall and spring, and so on. And now, of course, we also want to pepper in a few seasons of winter in the course of a year. Winter is, of course, our fasting season. So whether you are choosing to fast for a day once a week, or a weekend once a month, or 3 days every change in the actual natural season, so 4 times a year, maybe you only want to do one fast a year. It's absolutely up to you. But winter is our season of digestive rest, when the body can take all of that energy, which is normally allocated to digestion, and put it into detoxification and recycling old cells, old proteins, old enzymes through a process called autophagy to create greater longevity. So if you are looking for a way to reverse your clock, literally the fountain of youth is found in a season of winter. So if you are trying to look younger, if you're trying to get your body to feel younger, if you are trying to recover from a serious chronic illness, winter is a really good season to incorporate on a regular basis. Of course, only if you're able to do it and feel like you have abundance. Now, let's talk about fuel sources. So I tend to talk about, anyone who's seen me coaching about the seasons, you know that I talk with my hands and I usually say spring's over here and fall's way over here on the other end of the spectrum. So I decided to make a pretty picture, at least I think it's pretty with my limited abilities, to depict what we want to be doing when it comes to our intake of fuel in the different seasons. So if we start over in the green in our spring season, we have the most fat. 70% of what we are eating should be fat-based. Okay, it's mostly healthy fat. Protein stays pretty stable whether you are in spring, in summer, or in fall. It's pretty consistent at 20% of your intake. And then the balance is made up of those leafy green bitter veggies. At the opposite end of the spectrum, deep in fall, 60% of what you're eating is carbohydrate based. So you are eating a lot of all of the fruits, all of the veggies that you want. Your protein is still consistent at 20%, and you still want to be getting lots of those leafy greens. We want to have those consistent across the board. However, fat sort of falls back. So if 60% of what you're eating is carbohydrate based and 20% is made up of your protein sources, then fat only makes up that 20% balance. And so many of you have asked me, is it possible for me to continue to release fat if I'm in fall, even if I'm staying in fall for a longer period of time? And my answer to you is absolutely yes. However, this is the key concept to understand, right? If you are a hunter and you are out in nature and you are trying to get an antelope, right? That's your goal. You need to get an antelope because you're going to kill it and you're going to eat it. All of its protein, all of its fat, that's going to be what you are going to subsist upon for the day. How often do you think you got lucky and you killed that antelope underneath a fig tree? Give me a percentage. How often is it going to be that that antelope or animal would fall directly underneath a fruit tree? 0. Pretty close to 0. Our bodies were not built to consume high amounts of fat and high amounts of sugar at the same time. We were not built to do that. It was very, very rare that that would happen in nature. However, in our modern world, things like French fries and pizza and donuts and all of these highly processed foods, the reason that they are called highly palatable foods is that they light up all of the areas of our brain that says, yes, I'm not going to starve today. This is amazing. Because we've got a huge amount of fat and a huge amount of sugar, boom, coming in at the same time. So it is literally fireworks for all of the reward centers in our brain. Because what the body can do when it gets these foods that are 50% fat and 50% sugar is it can burn the sugar immediately or in the next few hours. And all of that fat is already nicely packaged as fat. The body doesn't even have to do anything to compress that fuel into fat. So it just goes, oh, here you are, fat, settle nicely on the thighs. You there, fat, settle on the back of the arms. I believe we have some space on the love handles. So it's a really nice way for your body to accumulate fat. And remember that your ancient hardware does not understand that you don't want to be gaining fat. Your body does not understand that message. It's like, are you crazy? Of course we need to store all of the fat. We could be dying at any point. Don't you realize that we are in the middle of a pandemic? Things are terribly frightening. Of course you want to be storing fat. So it does not understand that you have safety, that you have security, that you have relative food security. So that is something that we continually want to keep in mind when it comes to our seasons, is that we are either in spring, in summer, or in fall. When we combine fat and sugar, that is how we store fat. So there's no problem being in any of those seasons and being able to release fat or being able to gain muscle. But we want to have that separation. And that's why we have these clear-cut ratios. Those ratios can be cut up within 24 hours. They can be cut up within a week, within weeks, within months. But consistency is really important to the body. Your body likes to know what's happening, likes to have a schedule, and it likes to have those specifications and separations, because those separations can conduct a chemical message and tell your body what it needs to be doing. It likes to know so that you don't get mad at it. So this is why we have spring over here with 70% fat, and we have fall over here with 60% carbohydrates. Now, in between is where we ebb and flow through summer. In summertime, early summer, we still have a good amount of fat coming in, and we're mostly still having a lot of leafy greens. And then sometimes we're having some of those less sweet fruits like berries or like star fruit, small quantities of melon. When we are here in early summer, that's where we think about fruit and root vegetables as being rare or occasional. So we're not having them that often. As we move deeper into summer, we get more and more sweet fruits. Honey becomes more and more available. So it moves from being rarely to occasional to maybe being acceptable in deep summer, late summer. And then in fall, it might move into the essential category for you. So really, we want to be clear here on which foods go where so that you can build them into your food categories. As I wrote in my email to you this morning, most of you have spring pretty clear in your mind because we spend a good amount of time in spring. Some of you are in my spring program right now, so it's pretty at the front of your mind of what foods are there. But I've also given you lists of produce that come into season in summer and in fall, so that you can put some of those favored fruits or your favorite vegetables into your food categories for each of those seasons, so you know what's on your menu and what's not. Our food categories aren't just about the foods that we would call supportive. We also want to think about the foods that are unsupportive when we're making our seasons. So I know I've got the sidebar here, and I also have the chat open. But is everyone kind of like, for the most part, do you feel pretty clear on the fuel source thing? What you're meant to be eating in what season? Give me a thumbs up if that's pretty clear to you, or a nod. Okay, cool. So let's talk about our food categories. Now, this is the part where a lot of people are like, this does not feel like freedom. This feels like a lot of work. It feels tedious. I don't want to do it. But I need to tell you that right now, and anyone, please put into the chat if you are a seasoned WildFit graduate, you've had a lot of seasonal cycling under your belt, you've played with the ratios, or maybe you got lost because you didn't do this. Can you attest to the fact that these seasonal ratios are a little bit important, right? And that having these food categories is also pretty important. Reason being, they give you the ability to think about all of the what ifs that you probably did not already consider. So for example, and we want to have a set of 5 food categories for every season. You want one of these for spring, you want one for summer, and you want one for fall. It's kind of hard to make one for winter because it's like, well, water is essential, and maybe I have bone broth is acceptable, and I have my alkagizer as occasional. Done, pretty easy. But when it comes to the other seasons, this is important for 2 reasons. One, above all else, we want to make sure that we're getting more of the good stuff. And sometimes when we get the freedom of being out of the challenge, it's like, I'm free, I can do whatever I want. So maybe your alkagizer becomes less important, or maybe you're not eating salads as often, or maybe you're putting rice on your plate again, or white potatoes on your plate again. All of those substrate foods are coming back, and you're not making as much room for vegetables. So by having all of our foods that are really important for our health, our supportive foods in our food categories, we remember what we need to thrive. Me, I need my alkagizer to thrive when I am in spring. I need it. It's a good way for me to get a lot of vegetables without having my salads. I don't really like eating salad all that much. Too much chewing. I prefer to have my alkagizer. So for me, it's essential in spring. When I move into summer and I'm able to have some fruit on my salad, salad suddenly becomes a whole lot more appealing to me, and I like to eat more of them. So in summer, I don't really need to be having as much alkagizer. It might be something that I enjoy occasionally, like if I'm going hiking or I'm going traveling. Then when I move into fall, suddenly my alkagizer becomes really important to me again. I don't have it every day, but I make sure that I have it at least every 3 days, because otherwise my sugar cravings become overwhelming. So we want to get super clear on what our essential foods are that help us to thrive, but also that make us feel really good. So maybe for you, you need to have sweet potato in summer, or it doesn't feel like there's enough abundance. And it's something that you wait for when you're in spring, and then suddenly it's a huge treat and it feels really sweet. So for you, that might be essential. Whereas for someone else, it might be like, take it or leave it. I'm not really crazy about it, but I know that it has a lot of beta carotene and other important nutrients. So I'll make sure that it gets in there occasionally. So when it comes to your supportive foods, make sure that they have a place in your food categories, so you know what you're always going to be including. Now, let's talk about our unsupportive foods, because this is where the food categories become super important. We all have those foods where it's like, yeah, I know it's not good for me. I know it's not good for me, but I like it. I like the way it tastes, or I like the way the texture is in my mouth, or I love how beautiful it is, and I love eating that beautiful food. So with no judgment, we want to find a place for all of those foods. However, we also want to find that place with respect for our body. So your body is giving you clear signals on where those foods ought to be. Now, I've kind of written out how my body signals to me. If I have a food which I know is like, this gives me instantaneous diarrhea, but I love it, I probably only want to have it very rarely. So my favorite example, and it's a very true example, is that I love having a latte. I love a latte with unsweetened soy milk. And I want that latte to be with vanilla powder, and I want it to be at one specific cafe. And I usually like to enjoy that coffee with a butter croissant. My body does not like gluten. My body does not like butter. If I eat too much of it, the back of my throat gets itchy and I start to get a headache and I get cranky. But it's a food that I really enjoy eating on occasion, and it makes me feel like I have food freedom. So I have that rarely. And that rarely is not like, well, whenever it comes up, rarely, because that's a word that doesn't necessarily have meaning. So put into the chat right now, what does rarely mean to you when you hear this word? Is it once a week? Once a month? On the blue moon, once a year? It's pretty different to each of us. So we want to be sure that when we say that we're having a food rarely, for each food, we want to know when that's coming up. So for me, I like to have my latte at a specific cafe that is across the bridge from me. The cafe is called 2 If by C. They make the best lattes, in my opinion, and also the best pastries. And I will sit there once every couple of months when I need to go over the bridge, and I will enjoy it. I will sit there and be present with it. I don't have guilt. I'm not looking over my shoulder like, oh my God, who's going to come and see me eating this? It's like I'm going to really sit with it and taste it and really be present with it and not feel any guilt or any shame or anything like that, because I've decided how often I want to have this food. Now, in the beginning, this might feel like you're putting a lot of control and constraint around yourself. But let me give you a for instance. If I didn't say, well, I'm only going to have that butter croissant once every couple of months, and I left my rare to be like, well, whenever it comes up, how long is it going to be before I'm like, well, I could go do my grocery shopping in Halifax, but I really like the Costco over in Dartmouth Crossing. I could go over the bridge. I could do it there. And while I'm there, I might as well go to 2 if by C. I mean, I'm in the neighborhood. So it's then a lot easier for our food devil and our sugar monster to start putting in the digs for all of these foods that we might have decided were rare, and now suddenly they've become occasional, and then they're acceptable, and now suddenly we can't live without them again. So this is actually a really beautiful way of creating our freedom, because we don't have to listen to that consistent chatter in our brain. My brain might say, well, we could go to Dartmouth Crossing. And I'm like, yeah, that's a really good try, but I know that I was just over there a couple of months ago. It's another good 2-3 weeks before we have to go again. Don't push it. And suddenly the dialogue becomes that much easier. Now, who has foods that they are free from? You're like, yes, this is definitely a category 5 food, not something I'm going to include anytime soon. How many of you still feel like forever is a really long time? Like, I'm not sure if I'm completely free from that food forever. Like, is that like binding? Is that like if I sign my name to that, am I going to be in these shackles and I can really never have that food? So let's let go of the idea that it's forever. Because as soon as we say, I will never have Pepsi ever again, something in your brain goes like, yeah, but you could though. If you wanted to, do you want to? Because you could. No one can tell you what to do. Go and have a Pepsi. Because as soon as we say never, something in us wants to rebel. So it's a lot easier if we say, I'm choosing not to have Pepsi or any kind of soda, because I know it's bad for my teeth. I know it rots my gut. I know it kills my gut bacteria. I'm trying to improve my immune health right now. So it's not something I need in my life. So that I'm going to put below the freedom line. If I want to have bubbly water, I'll have bubbly soda water with a slice of lime, and it'll be delicious. That to me is acceptable, no matter what season I'm in. Now suddenly it feels like freedom. So as you are starting to think about these food categories, it can be easy to just say bread. Bread's occasional. I don't want you to just say bread. I want you to say rye bread and a fresh baguette and those butter croissants and the hot cross buns that my grandma makes. Like, I want them each to be individual foods, and I want you to put them into the category. You don't have to put all foods that were ever created into these categories. They are going to grow as you continue to live Wild Fit, but it's really important to include all of the foods that you do eat on a regular basis, preferably the foods that you ate before the challenge to know where they stand, and all of the foods that you know that you need for optimal health. Now, let's talk a little bit more about Wild Fit categorizations for foods, because I know some of you are like, what really makes a food supportive and what really makes a food unsupportive? So I would love to see in the chat, what do you believe makes a supportive food? Just have some guesses. And Judith, don't worry, you are going to get all of these slides. So you don't need to take too many pictures or notes if you don't want to. So what are some of the things that make our food categories? Why is my chat window not popping up? Hello. Okay, so without seeing your answers, I will just tell you. Our food categories, when Eric was dreaming them up, they basically come down to how long have people been eating this? So if it's something like a yam is one of the most ancient human tubers. So when we weren't able to catch antelopes or other prey, and we weren't able to get fresh fruit, and there weren't any greens that were in season, we would start to dig up tubers. And the ones that we would find most commonly are yams. If you're not familiar with yams, it's like a sweet potato, right? They're the long orange ones. Sweet potatoes are from South America. Yams are from Africa. Why are sweet potatoes all right when it comes to our enhancements and white potatoes got the cold shoulder? Anyone know? Just stop sharing for a second so I can see. Talking specifically about sweet potatoes versus potatoes. The nutritional value, yes, that has a lot to do with it. But what else? Yeah, regular white potatoes are nightshades, so they have a lot of anti-nutrients, things that damage the body. And it also comes down to how much fiber they have, how quickly they digest in the body. So it's almost like every single food we put onto a scale, and weighing each side is like, what are the benefits that this has for the human body? And what are the deficits? Like, what are the bad sides of this food? How is it going to harm you? Now, on top of that, it's also like, is your body familiar with this food? Because I don't know about most of you, but it was sometime in like second or third grade when we were introduced to the digestive system. And you know, when it's like that open mouth and then it's just like this tube and then it gets kind of wiggly down towards the bottom and then it goes out and everyone's like, tee hee hee, because that's where you poop. So that's what we all think about when it comes to digestion, that it's just like this straightforward action. The food gets churned up and then we digest it out the other end. But our bodies actually have this super complex language that it speaks with every single food. It talks to the food and the food talks back. It talks in nutrients. It talks in enzymes. It talks in bacteria. So every single food that you're eating comes with its own baggage, all of its own composition and also its own microbiome. And that speaks to our microbiome. So about 500 years ago, when some guy brought white potatoes up to Europe, they were like, sweet, we're not going to be starved. This is amazing. And at that time, it was amazing, because if it comes down to starvation or eating potatoes, I'd rather have potatoes. But now, in this age of abundance that all of us are so lucky to experience, we don't need to eat those white potatoes for survival. And it turns out the language that that potato is speaking with our body is a pretty aggressive one. The potato's like, yeah, you can eat me, but not without a fight. And then you eat it, and then it's like you get all of this inflammation in all of your joints. So there's a big cost to eating those potatoes. It might taste nice with butter, but it's going to cost you. So with each and every food, we want to consider, not in too much detail, don't worry if you're feeling overwhelmed, but how long have people been eating this food? How long have they been in a relationship with this food? And if I were to think about this food on a balancing scale, how many benefits does it have versus how many costs? And sometimes we want to go for the food that has more costs. Sometimes I love some French fries. I eat them with mayonnaise and lots of salt, and they're delicious. But I recognize that they have a lot of deficits to my body that I've been working so hard to support, and that I've been trying to be making healthy with all of these expensive alkalizers and so on. So it's not worth too much of that cost to eat those foods all of the time, right? So I choose to put them as something that I have rarely, because yes, they're delicious, But once they get to that squiggly part of my digestive system, they cause a lot of bloating. They make me really sleepy. They make me really gassy. It's not worth it. So these are the things that we want to consider when it comes to which foods we choose to put where. Now, do we feel like we understand why we categorize foods? Give me a thumbs up if a yes. Do you feel like you're starting to understand how putting foods into these categories actually creates some boundaries for us and how we're choosing to honor our health? Going through. Good amount of people. Okay, if you don't worry. We're going to get to questions soon. And can you start to see how having these categories might actually give you more freedom? Okay, good. So now let's play a little game. If you had to place some of these foods into seasons and into categories, where would they go? So just choose one or two. Eggs, tomatoes, butter, coffee, bread. Remember to be specific when it comes to bread. We all have our favorite bread. Mangoes, tequila, wine. Where do these foods go for us? Which season are you going to be eating them in? Meaning, are they mostly fat? Are they mostly sugar? Right? If they're mostly fat, maybe they have a place in spring also if they are mostly protein or if they are leafy greens. And the more sugar that they have, the further along the spectrum they go towards fall. And if they are sugar-based, the further we move towards fall, the more often we want to consider having them. All right, now I'm going to go into the chat. Which for some reason, it's my connection. So where are we placing some of those? Rasha, tomatoes in summer or fall. And for you, how often are you having tomatoes? Are they essential? Are they acceptable? Eggs, essential in all seasons. Isabel, I love that. You're deciding for you. Laura is saying tequila is occasionally in what season? And bread, rarely. What kind of bread? And in what season? Rasha, mangoes in fall. Yes, absolutely. And how often are you going to choose to have mangoes? Some people, mangoes taste amazing and they feel amazing in the body. Other people, they eat mangoes, it makes their tongue itchy and it makes them break out in a rash. So depending on you, it might be something you enjoy rarely, or it might be something that you feel is really acceptable. Now remember, the sweeter the fruit, the further along the spectrum it goes. So mangoes are a fall fruit, whereas something like citrus or berries or even a little bit of mango would be considered a summer fruit. All right, I love this. You guys seem to be grasping the topic. Remember, I'm asking not only for how often you're having it, but also what category you're putting it in. So Judith, you might have coffee across the board for spring, summer, and fall. Or you might not. Teresa, wine, summer and fall occasional. And now, Teresa, when it comes to something like this, for all of us, we want to be really considerate of, is that an emotional reason for having the food? Or is it a variety reason for having the food? If it's about emotion, As long as you're aware of it so that you're going to be practicing your dialogue and your food timeline, no problem. But we want to flag those foods which we know that we eat emotionally so that they don't end up being cascade foods. Going through. Butter, grass-fed only, rarely. See, I love that, Angela, because now you're specifying what kind of butter, what quality of butter is it going to be? Is it going to be any old butter that we know could be from any old cow? Or is it only the best cows that were fed the best foods that lead the best lives? You're putting all of this effort, attention, and energy into being the healthiest that you can be. So now we want to start paying more attention to the quality of food which we're eating. And Judith, you're adding butter is dairy, so rarely. Great, you're putting a qualifier in. So let's get back into just a couple more specifications, and then we'll get into questions. So essentially, here's our guidelines. Again, to reiterate, when it comes to creating our seasonal ratios and more importantly, our food categories. We want to be as specific as possible. The more specific that you are, the less of an opportunity your food devil has to come in and be like, well, you know, I don't know what you think of as occasional, but I heard occasional is every second day. So if you've already decided that occasional means once a month, then your food devil doesn't have a leg to stand on, or a hoof, depending on what your food devil looks like. Okay, so the next thing is we want to be using our food timeline. So your body is going to play a huge factor in deciding where these foods go. Some of you that are just coming out of the 90-day challenge, take some time to experiment with these foods. And that means instead of just rushing in and having like 8 slices of pizza and being like, wow, pizza hates me and my body hates pizza, start with mozzarella cheese or start with white flour and have it as a simple experiment, because then you can get a really clear message from your body on how it responds to specific foods. Because for you, maybe if you are getting ancient grain white flour from Italy, your body can tolerate it and you don't get indigestion and you don't get bloated. But when you have the regular old white flour that comes from North America, that's grown with like as a monocrop with lots of different pesticides and herbicides, and it's really hardy wheat to sustain Canadian winter, that kind of wheat, maybe for you, your body won't tolerate it. So the more specific you can be, the more freedom you create, because that means that maybe you go and you enjoy authentic Italian pizza and you can do it more often. Whereas, and that's because you always stay away from the lower quality of grain. Does that make sense? So next thing is we want to be deciding on our food categories based on you. So we're going to get into specific examples of what works for different people. But if you are a person who flies by the seat of your pants, who doesn't really decide what you're eating ahead of time, who just walks into the kitchen and you're like, oh, what do I want? What do I want? What do I feel like? Kind of like me. Then it's not a great idea to set yourself up with really rigid, tight seasonal ratios. Because if you are more of like the ebb and flow kind of person, and yet you're setting up your ratio so it's like for 2 days I'm in spring, and then 1 day I'm in summer, and then 1 day I'm in fall, and then I go back to spring, that's probably not going to work for you. But if you say, well, I'm going to have 2 weeks in spring, and then I'm going to flow into summer, that's probably what's going to work. Whereas if you're a person who has a lot more scheduling ability, then you can probably have those tighter seasons and they'll work really well for you. And the last and most important thing is, please remember that there are no good or bad foods. There are foods that are more supportive and foods which are less supportive. And you are the one who ultimately decides which foods are supportive of your best health, which give you the most abundance and give you the greatest sense of freedom. So don't let anyone else decide that like, butter's bad, so I can't possibly put it on to my list because Eric might see it and he might kick me in the ass. Like, that's not going to happen. So let's be super clear that this is up to you and your body. What I really want you to understand, though, is that if you decide, I really like butter, I like the way it tastes, I like how it makes different foods be textured, I really like the way it feels in my mouth, but you immediately get diarrhea after eating it, your body's sending you a really clear signal that butter is not a good food for you. And our body only, like your body doesn't like to throw up or have diarrhea any more than you do. It's a lot of effort. It takes a lot of resources. You lose a lot of water, a lot of the food that's just been digested so well, it's just pulled the chute. Your body doesn't like doing it. It will only do it if it believes that you've been poisoned. So keep that in mind. If you get any of those really severe digestive symptoms after eating something, it means that your body believes it's been poisoned. So please do keep that in consideration when you're choosing your foods and respect your body and what your body wants. So that being said, let's jump into some questions and answer period so that you can feel like you have all the information that you need to go ahead and make your seasonal ratios and your food categories. So Kira, you had your hand up from the very beginning. I'm going to go over to you first.
Thank you so much. Ariel, was a great presentation. Thank you. Clarification, big time. Thank you. A couple of questions I have. What I want to clarify with you is being in spring, I'm planning to be in it for a while. I have a lot to work on. And the confusion I have that, does it mean that I have to continue with high consumption of meat or fish for a long time or not? Because I've got another message somewhere in the program that we were suggested to have protein maybe twice a week. So that's what I would like to clarify. And along with this, because I love Alka-Geyser and I'm planning on having it every day, the concern came up, is it such thing that might be too much spinach? Is it good for our body or not? Is there any toxicity associated with it? Or we really, so this is what I wanted to ask. If you can please clarify how to work with this.
Okay, great questions. So first of all, like when it comes to spinach and other greens, like I was talking about, each and every food communicates with our body. And certain foods want to be eaten and other foods don't want to be eaten that we consider food. So plants, for the most part, they don't like us eating them. They can't run away. So they're kind of like, as we're coming over and pick them. But they can only have like small amounts of physical defenses. Like some leaves will have spines. Some branches or stems of plants will have thorns. So they have some physical defenses, but for the most part, plants have chemical defenses. So they like to get back at us after. They try to get at us by having, like, you might notice with spinach, baby spinach tastes a lot sweeter than adult or mature spinach, right? So when a plant is growing like spinach and it has baby leaves, it's not as important if those leaves survive, because right now the plant's energy is focused on growing more leaves. So if something like a deer or a human comes along and eats those leaves, it's like, meh, I'll grow some more. So it doesn't have as much of its effort put into putting anti-nutrients into those leaves. But as the plant becomes more mature, those leaves become more important. It has to get energy from the sun to convert into sugar to put into creating the flowers and the seeds of that plant. So the leaves become more and more bitter as a way of deterring animals from eating too much of them. Now, if you eat them anyway, the plant has a way of getting revenge. And that is to upset your digestion or to confuse your digestion. So those leaves have a lot of benefits, right? They have a lot of good stuff in them that we can use as nutrition. The fiber is really good for our digestive tract, but there are some deficits. There are some anti-nutrients. So we want to get those baby spinach leaves and maybe not eat the really mature ones. And also, this is why variety is so important. So the spinach gets revenge on us for a while, and then the Swiss chard gets its revenge, and then collards come and get their revenge. And each one has different amounts of anti-nutrients and different amounts of the good nutrients, the positive vitamins and minerals and so on that we really need. So is spinach good or bad? It's neither. It's just really important that we cycle it with a variety of other plant foods. Now, when it comes to how much meat do you need for spring, the idea that we only need meat once a week or even once a month, that's when we're talking about nutrient deficiencies. So vegans really need to supplement certain nutrients like vitamin B12 and sometimes iron and sometimes vitamin D and, you know, just certain other nutrients in order to thrive, because we can store a certain amount of vitamin B12 for months, but after those months, it gets depleted and we really only get good vitamin B12 from animals. So this is when people are more flexitarian, like, I don't like eating meat. I don't like it for the planet. I don't like it for my body, but I'm willing to do it for my optimal health. What is the minimum amount that I need to thrive? That's where we say, well, maybe once a week or once a month is what you want to consider. You can have meat a lot more often if you would like to. However, for Wild Fit, we are always after you getting the best quality possible. So making sure that you are eating animals who led really great lives, who were able to live in alignment with what they were meant to do. Like they were allowed to go outside, they were allowed to frolic if they wanted to, they were allowed to run if they wanted to. So they had a really good life. They ate the food that they were meant to eat. So they were able to free range and get all of the nutrients that they needed. And then they were killed and harvested in a way that was minimizing their pain and suffering. Because all of that goes into making really high quality food for us, right? And it's paying back for, you know, voting with our dollars for the kind of planet that we want to have. So really long answer to your simple question. You can have meat every day if you want to, you don't have to. If you are in spring, please don't feel like you need to be in spring in order to continue to release. If you still have a good amount of fat that you're looking to release, then spring might be your base season, for example. But you might go into summer for a week every 3 weeks to make sure that you're getting a variety of other nutrients, to rejuvenate your skin, to allow your muscles to plump up full of water. Maybe you even throw in a day here or there of fall so that you really get the abundance and variety that you're looking for. And then you cycle back into spring. What's the really crucial take home is that you're not having too many of those meals or those days where it's 50% fat and 50% sugar. That's where your body's like, oh, winter's coming. I'm going to store that here and that there and that there. And it switches from burning fat into storing fat. Does that help?
Yes, very much so. Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And very quick question. I've heard Eric was saying that he has your program translated into different languages, and he mentioned Russian. So I want to ask you how to have an access to that in Russian language. So I want to spread it to the community for
Amazing. Okay, so what you want to do is, oh, I'm just gonna, because you have some feedback there. Kira, I've put the best email into the chat here. So it's support@getwildfit.com. So you write them an email and you say, I want to be a WildFit ambassador and I want to spread it to my community and I want people to access it in Russian. How do I do that? And they will help you get all set up with that to the best of their ability, okay? I'm going to go over to Anne next.
Thank you for taking this. I wrote it out to make it efficient, hopefully. So I went directly from WildFit into your spring program, which I'm doing right now. So I never really experimented with seasons. And when I finish your program, I have 7 days before I leave for my daughters in Austin, Texas, that I haven't been to in a year, for 14 days. She is macrobiotic trained and a practitioner. So when we're there, there's a lot of rice normally, but she also has plenty of organic fruits, vegetables, protein, eggs, all those things. I was thinking maybe summer would be a good season while I'm there if I avoid the rice. I don't have to eat rice. I'm not that tempted by it or anything. Then I come home for 18 days and we're leaving for 2 weeks in California as a family vacation where I'll have a refrigerator in my hotel room, but we're moving locations like every 3 days. I'm taking a blender. I'll make my alkalizers. I'll eat good quality food, drink my water, but I still want to release, like, I don't know if I can equate it to pounds because it's more body shaping around the middle. And I still want to build muscle. I'll still be exercising. Suggestions for me, please?
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about movement, right? How many people here on this call feel like now that I'm done the challenge, or maybe you were exercising all the way through, but you're like, now I have more energy. I'd like to have more intentional movement. Okay. So let's talk about ways that we can structure that for you, because Anne also plays into what you want to do. So for example, as Anne was saying, she's in my season of spring program right now. We're doing it for 4 weeks. We're going into week 3. My body will not release another pound. It won't. It's like, okay, maybe that's something you want, but right now, that's not my focus, because my body is at a point where it's like, I like my life insurance. This fat that we might still have on the legs and around the belly and the arms, that's for an apocalypse, which you've been hearing on the news could be any day now. So my body is not willing to let it go very easily. So if that's your body, then your body is going to need some encouragement in order to feel like it wants to release that fat. And that comes with intentional movement. So, and then it really becomes a conversation about how can you sustain a summer season and incorporate all of your movement so that you are still creating a deficit of energy, because at the end of the day, we still want to be using that old math where it's like, okay, I need my metabolism to be high enough because I'm giving it abundance, because I'm keeping my stress low, because I'm keeping my nutrients high. So my metabolism will be up, but I'm also going to only eat to the point that I'm satisfied rather than eating to the point that I'm absolutely stuffed full. And therefore, there's a deficiency in the amount of energy that my body needs versus the amount that I'm giving my body. And therefore, it'll be forced to reconsider burning the fat that it doesn't want to burn. So in that instance, where you feel really good moving your body, you could sustain summer for that entire period of time. And for those 18 days, maybe you even want to play with the idea of spending a few days in fall. Because when we're in fall, if we have a lot of clarity, right, we know which unsupportive foods we want to include, we know which unsupportive foods are below our freedom line. And then it's like I'm at a restaurant and I'm choosing to have dessert, or I'm choosing to have a baked potato or whatever it is, because sometimes that can be nice and we don't want to feel like we're missing out. So really structuring it in that way, if it's about body composition, it's like, how can I feed my body all of the fuel that it needs to have the best possible workouts so that my body can then rebuild muscle to the best of its ability and reshape and recontour the body that I'm looking for. We all need sugar, the best kind of sugar, in order to be building muscle. We can tear down our muscle in any season, but if you go in and you have a hike where you're using your legs a lot and suddenly your calves want to grow, or the backs of your legs, those hamstrings want to grow, they can't do it unless they have carbohydrates. We need carbohydrates and protein and water to build muscle. So what your body will do if you're asking it to build muscle and it's looking around and it doesn't see any carbohydrates, it's like, well, you're asking me to grow my calves. You haven't used your biceps in a while. I'll just borrow some amino acids from the biceps and put them here into those, and some, like, basically tears down some muscle tissue in the biceps and carries it down into the calves and builds your calves. So that's why sometimes if we're in spring for too long, we see our muscles seem like they're shrinking. Yes. And it's because your body is reallocating resources to what's important. So that's why if we're trying to be really active, we do need to cycle into summer every now and again, or fall every now and again, in order to really create that composition that we're looking for.
And you're not seeing a need in there for a few day fast in between, as long as I'm pretty much sticking with very functional foods for myself.
Absolutely. Like, I love personally to fast on travel days, because I don't like the hassle of having to look for foods in airports. I don't like the hassle of having to choose if I'm going to eat on an airplane. I just decide I'm going to fuel up on Alka-Geyser before I leave. I'll fast for the day, and then I'll worry about eating when I land. That's just what works for my body.
That's a great idea.
Other people, it doesn't work so much. So you have to honor what your body likes. Mm-hmm. Other people, you only feel comfortable fasting when you're at home in your pajamas and you can have a lot of hot tea, right? To each their own. It's about what works for us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm so happy for you.
Thanks.
Angela, over to you next.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Thank you for doing this, Ariel. So I have just a bunch of random questions. So I'll go through them and you can stop me when I've used up my time. So the first one is, I'm wondering if there's a system that we can use to categorize foods objectively, rather than having to rely on the WildFit lists. Like, does it have to do with a glycemic index, or if something like a fruit or a vegetable is not on the list, how would I know if it's summer or fall?
Mm-hmm. So basically, when it comes to, there's a pretty definitive line between spring and summer, because after a food gets up to like more than 4 net grams of carbohydrates per 100 grams, then it becomes a mild spring food. After about 6 net grams per 100 grams, then it becomes a summer food. So that sort of comes into play, but it also has to do with the origin of the food, nutrients versus anti-nutrients. When it comes to summer and fall, it's more of an open spectrum. So we have our less sweet fruits, which is basically anything that tastes sweet but has a little bit of a tang to it. So you notice it's not that sweet. Same thing with the root vegetables. Then it's more like the quantity versus, because you can have sweet potatoes and beets in summer, but they're also fall foods. But in summer, you'd be having a smaller quantity and maybe only once a day, whereas in fall, you might want to have them with every meal. So that's
Okay.
what it's more about.
Okay. How do you keep track of when you can have your next non-functional food items? Like, I don't know how rigid you get about this, but let's say you do your lattes rarely, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have one, and then, I mean, it's not just the lattes, there might be other non-functional foods, right? So do you just go by like intuitively, or do you have a system where you keep track of, I had this, or when I can have it next? Do you put in your calendar?
So like basically a lot of just trial and error after the challenge. And we have a lot of those experiments when we are in fall season, because that's where a lot of the unsupportive foods fall, right? Some people choose to have coffee in spring because it doesn't interfere in ketosis. Some arguments say that it's actually beneficial in detoxifying the liver. Other people are like, coffee doesn't feel good in my body. It's a natural diuretic. I'm already peeing out enough when I'm in spring. My kidneys already have it hard enough when I'm in spring. Not a food for me in spring. So that's where it really becomes personal. It's more subjective, and it has to do with the feedback that you get from your body. So you will very rarely see me eating refined sugar, because if I would eat one of my daughter's Easter eggs, I could talk myself into having 3, 4, 5, 6, because I am very sugar sensitive. So for me, I like to put that in my rarely category, and most refined sugar goes below my freedom line. To the point that, okay, my daughter really wanted this gummy bear mold. She wanted to make a giant gummy bear, and you need Jello and gelatin to make that giant gummy bear. And for her, it wasn't necessarily to eat it. It was just the novelty of having it. Now, we were making the Jello in the kitchen, and she licked her finger and then licked the Jello powder and was almost about to put it in her mouth. And I'm like, oh, Zaya, don't eat that. And she was like, what? Why? I'm like, because it's not food. So to me, Jello, in my mind, is literally not a food anymore.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the point that we get to as we practice, where you just start to see things quite differently. But it does take a little bit of experience. And then it comes to sort of like what Anne was saying, rice doesn't call to her. So there's not really any reason for her to include that unsupportive food.
Right.
Whereas if rice is something that culturally feels really important to you, every time your family eats it and you can't have it, you feel like you're missing out, and you're really dreaming of the day when you could have just a tablespoon. In my mind, I'm like, why would you put yourself through that torture? Just put it in season, in fall, decide that you have it once a week and you really enjoy it, and be done with it. Because then there's no more guilt. There's no more being a martyr. There's no more suffering. You're just super clear. This is when I choose to have this food. I'm still trying to release fat. It doesn't have a function in my life. So I know that I'm eating it emotionally, and this is when I choose to have it. So really what you'll come to understand is it's only really the foods that still have power over us that we need to be super, super clear about. Everything else falls into place as it needs to for the most part. And that's why it's really helpful to start with those foods and then sort of find our way into the other ones.
Okay. I'm going to be getting a vaccine soon, and I was wondering if it would be good to fast before it.
I might try having some alkagizer and bone broth for a couple days beforehand, or raw foods. And then maybe doing a couple of days fasting after the fact.
Okay. And I heard you say mixing fruit with salad. So I've got this thing stuck in my head saying I can only have fruit in the morning on an empty stomach. but it's okay. So I guess once we've sort of healed and cleaned out our system, we can occasionally have fruit in our salads, in our green vegetable salads.
Yes. So when we're moving through the challenge, it's all about healing. We want maximum amount of healing in 13 weeks. So if you are still after optimal health and your digestive system is still not that great, it's a really good idea to keep your fruit separate from other foods. However, if for you, you're like, my digestion is pretty good and I enjoy the variety and the abundance when I see that color on my salad and it means that I'll eat more salad, then combining it with salad, it's sort of the same as having the Alka-Geyser mild. Then you'll notice, like in a lot of my blogs that I share and a lot of the recipes that I share on social media and in my Facebook groups, a lot of those have fruit as a sweetener. And that's really when we're thinking on the spectrum, is it better to have fruit apart from other foods, or is it better to have refined sugar? I'd rather have fruit as a sweetener. So we're always trying to do the best we can with what we have, rather than this idea that there's some perfect version of WildFit that we're striving for.
Okay. I have one last question, if I may. When you talk about in spring, we get 70% fat and 20% protein and 10% carbs and, you know, et cetera. Like, I'm like, I don't know what that is, right? So do you suggest that we use one of those apps where you put in the food and then it breaks it down and tells you what's what? Because I don't know what percentage of fat I'm getting from what I'm eating. I don't really know.
Great question. So for some of us, it can be as simple as if you look at a boneless, skinless chicken breast. What is that mostly?
Protein?
Protein. If you were to look at skin on chicken thighs, what are those?
I don't know. 50-50? I don't really know.
It's
Is
like
it
protein
50-50?
and a good amount of fat. The same thing with some of those oily fish, right? They taste really rich. So you're like, oh, this has a good amount of fat. If you're eating an avocado, you know, well, this does have some carbohydrate because it's a fruit. It also has a little bit of protein, but I can taste the richness in it. I can taste the oil. So recognizing that it is a good amount of fat. So it can become about the flavor of food as well. Like when we look at eggs, eggs are protein, but they're also fat because of the yolk that's in them. So that's when we can think about the foods that are mostly fat. It's about flavor, and then the sweeter that they are, if they're a whole food, you'll notice in nature there are very few foods that have a lot of sugar and have a lot of fat, because it doesn't really happen. So the sweeter they are, generally the less fat they have. Now, you can also, and this is something that I like to do because I like certainty. So when I was learning about food, I spent a few days writing it all down. Not for every food, but the foods that I ate most often, because then I'd get an idea, okay, well, here's the plate of food that I'd like to eat. And now I know that it's mostly protein, there's a good amount of fat, there's some carbohydrates. And then you might have another soup that you make and you think, oh, well, this is a good amount of vegetables, but because of the oil that you make it with and the broth that you make it with, it's actually quite rich in fat and you weren't aware of it. So it can be useful for a few days to get an idea of the macros, especially when you're in spring. I like the keto app personally. That's the one that I use for spring because that's where it's most important, right? When you're moving into summer and fall, it sort of takes care of itself for the most part. It's mostly when we're in spring. So having a keto calculator can be quite helpful. I know for those of you who are in my season of spring right now, we're doing it a little bit differently. We're spending a little more time looking at those macros and things like that. Because as we move further into living WildFit, it becomes our own version of it, more so than the version that's created for you as a base program with WildFit. Angela, what's your, everyone here, do you have a plan of action post-challenge? Like, who are you connected with? I really recommend that you are like, obviously I'll do a plug for myself and say it's great if you connect with my Facebook group and you stay involved in my membership, but also if that's not working for you, are you involved with the Living Wild Fit membership? Are you involved with an alumni group of Wild Fitters? Do you have accountability buddies? Because it's wonderful to be having these conversations today, but now there's the integration that happens over the next week. So when we create them, that's awesome. But we also want to then talk about them and put them into practice and be talking about them so that it becomes a part of the conversation. So really, let's all aim to leave today with a game plan for how we're going to stay connected with the Wild Fit community as we start to practice living within these seasonal ratios and practicing our food categories, okay? And then it becomes like there's so much language involved. There's so many different concepts involved in this. There's a lot of experimentation that's necessary. And I know it can feel overwhelming. So hopefully by the end of today, it'll have a lot more clarity, but then you have to go out and practice it the same way as we practiced throughout the WildFit Challenge. And remember, like with the challenge, the more you practice, the more you get confidence. So that being said, I'm going to go over to Laura. Actually, sorry, I have to try to answer one question that came in from the chat. I think it might be quite specific. Okay. I recently discovered that I have a large group of polyps at the end of my colon, and I will most likely need surgery. Which season would be best for the period leading up to and after the surgery? I'm thinking fall before in order to store nutrients, and then spring afterwards for healing, and possibly winter the day of and plus or minus the day of surgery. Julia, that sounds like a really great plan. I would love to have a bigger conversation about what caused those polyps to be there, right? Like, what is the root cause of your colon being like, I am not happy? Like, was it inflammation? That's probably likely. Is it that there's an imbalance in your gut biota? Can we work with different foods to bring down that inflammation, to soothe that area of your body, to really make sure that you're eating the right kind of fiber so that this doesn't keep on happening? Because if those polyps are removed and you end up having scar tissue, then there's a likelihood that more complications will come up in that area. So I'd love it if you contacted me through, I'll give you Living Well.
I'm actually here. I don't know if you
Ariel.
can hear me. I'm in the car and it might be very noisy. So if there's a lot of like background noise, just let me know.
What I want to say, Julia, is that this is definitely more of like a specific question. So if you want to go on Facebook and talk to me in Living Well with Ariel, that's my Facebook group. So if you join that group, then we can have more of a specific conversation about your particular needs, because I feel like this extends out a little bit further than just talking about the season. And I would love to give you some specifics on what I might do. Okay.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to go over to Laura next.
Hi, Ariel, and hi, everybody. It is great to have this session because that gave me more information, and now I understand a little more. But I have a question for you, because I am normally very by the book, and I don't want to lose whatever I have gained now, that it's that I have lost weight and I feel very good, but I am in the spring. I have been in a deep spring for some time. So my question to you is, how do you see that? My general plan, and I am going to do my map, is how I call my map, is to be 3 weeks in the spring, 1 week in summer, and basically, if I have a something in a special, like a birthday or a food with friends, or if I am traveling, I can do something in a special, like at the rare or the occasionally. But the rest of the time be between the summer and the spring. Do you see that it's some kind of dangerous? Do you see that it's not correct? Because I don't want, for example, rice or potatoes. I don't want to eat like a occasionally, but if I have something, I can eat, and that's one day, and that's all. Do you see if I am losing some kind of vitamins or some kind of dangerous in general for the body? Because I am very sensitive for sugar, for dinners, for example. I need to take care of my dinners, a small quantity, so I can be very well. If I eat a lot at night, is not good for me. But how do you see this in general plan?
Okay, so here there's, and we all kind of really want to know about this, is where do I include fall, especially the idea of, am I having cheat days, or am I having days where I just throw everything out the window? And I really think that we want to be super clear on, even if we're going to a family gathering and we have this idea of, well, whatever's put out, I'm going to eat it. When we decide to do that, does it feel like freedom? Does it feel like a choice, or does it feel like just surrendering? And it comes down to your energy and who has the power. Because if you have the power and you say, well, I'm going to a barbecue, I know that there's going to be traditional dishes there. My kids are going to be cooking. I always love what they make. It's relatively healthy. There might be a few foods that are in my rarely category for fall. However, that's my choice. That feels a lot different than, I can't control what's being made and I really want to keep making progress, but I don't want to be a pain or a bother, so I'll just eat whatever's there. The first situation, you go into it with a plan. You go into it with awareness and you decide what you're going to eat. In the second way, there's a good chance that you're walking out of it feeling guilty, that you're feeling like you've set yourself back on your progress and everything else. So we want to be very aware of how we are feeling emotionally when it comes to particular foods.
Okay.
So if you're going into a circumstance and it's like the first situation, I'm feeling good, I plan to have a fall day, I'm going to enjoy some rice, it's going to be amazing. Your body understands abundance. If you're dreading it and you feel fearful of it and like you're not in control, then you're already in a space of fear, and that will raise your cortisol, and then all of the sugar that you end up eating, your body's going to store it for winter. So take some time before these events where you're going to have these experiments and live through it once. Really spend a little bit of time considering, okay, what's going to come up? Is anyone going to be pushing food at me? What am I going to say if food is pushed at me? Where are my boundaries? Like, I know that I might have some honey or maple syrup or coconut sugar, but I draw the line at refined sugar. Or I might have refined sugar or dairy, but sugar and dairy together, that creates a cascade for me and indigestion. So I'm not going to have that.
But it's not dangerous if I maintain my body normally between spring and summer? It's not, because this is what I want to do, really. I don't need rice, or I don't need sugar or dairy. I want to maintain me, I mean, 95% between summer and spring. It's not
Do you mean
something
like, is it
dangerous?
physically dangerous?
Yes, yes. Yes.
So if you're not eating a lot of dietary sugar, then your body has adjusted to not having a lot of sugar. So at that point, has anyone had this experience? I would love to know, where you're like, oh, I'm going to order dessert. I give myself permission to have any dessert that I want. and then you order the dessert and maybe you have a bite of it and you're like, whoa, that was so sweet.
Mhm.
And maybe you only have 1 or 2 bites and your body's like, okay, that's enough. I've had what I needed. I don't want any more. So something shifts as our tolerance shifts and our body starts to give us symptoms sooner. Like maybe your teeth immediately get super sticky and your mouth feels gross, or you get a headache like Temi is saying that she gets, or you get really tired. So this is your body saying that's enough. So this is why following that food timeline is really important, because then your body gives you feedback on what you need and what you don't need. What can be dangerous, not only physically, but emotionally, and for our self-confidence, is when we override what our body is telling us.
Okay. Okay. Understood. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I want to bring awareness to the fact that we are at time. We did start a couple of minutes late as we were waiting for people to jump on, and we do have a great big community of people who joined us. So I'm going to kind of end our call here, but as I said at the beginning, I am open to staying on for another 30 minutes or so to make sure that everyone can prepare their food categories and their seasonal ratios to the point that they feel comfortable. And I'm also going to invite all of you to join that Facebook group, Living Well with Ariel. Make sure that you do check out some of the membership options that are available to you. As I mentioned, I do have an essentials membership that you are welcome to look at. $20 Canadian a month gets you a really great community of people. We have a workshop call like this. We actually had this same workshop in a smaller group of people earlier this week. Every month we have different topics. Like next month, we're talking about shame and guilt around food. And we also have question and answer calls, and we have community calls. So it's a really great space. And then we have a smaller Facebook group. So make sure that you do check out that resource as an option if you want to have more connection like this. And I'll also drop in the Living Well with Ariel group, which is a free group that you are welcome to join. If you want to share your pictures of your food categories or your decided seasonal ratios as they show up on your calendar, that would also be really amazing, because then it inspires other people to do the same thing. So thank you to everyone who needs to sign off now. I so much appreciate you spending some of your Saturday with me, and I look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully in my Facebook group or my membership, but also in the Living Wild Fit community and in social media. And for those of you who still have questions, I'm going to keep the recording going so we can continue on. And you're all also going to get the recording by email. So don't feel any FOMO if you need to get off.
Thank you.
All right. Temi, I'm going to go to you next.
Yay! Hello, Ariel. Such
Hi.
a pleasure to talk to you. You are like a goddess in nutrition to me. All right, I know and I don't know. So I know all of this information, and I'm actually studying to be a coach right now.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, I am not able to do it to myself for my own body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to rewrite my story. And just like Anne, there's this fat composition around the belly and then the hips that's holding on for dear life. And I don't know what to do. So my old habit was, or the old way was, I would work out really hard 6 days a week, lots of weight training and counting every calorie, weighing every food. And I detest that part. I do not like counting calories. I've done it several times throughout the years, and I always end up just saying, okay, I can't do it anymore. And then just doing absolutely nothing. And so I'm trying to figure out what to do with all this new knowledge of WildFit. I've been in spring, I've been doing intermittent fasting and just going back and forth with spring, and then on for 5 days pretty much, and then On the weekend, I eat more like summer, fall, and then I go back to spring again. So that's what I've been doing, but my body just, I suspect that I've had so much hormonal imbalance that's what it's working on. That it's like, I don't have time for your fat BS right now. I just need to work on all this stuff because you're giving me time to heal. So that's where I am, and I need help.
Okay, are you active?
I'm doing almost every day 10,000 steps, and I count it on the phone, just like Eric says. So that's like a goal of mine to at least do the minimum, which is the 10,000 steps. And I have just started lifting again, but very mildly, just doing, very gentle, bicep curls and this and that.
So in a natural female body, we would be covering 10,000 steps or more in a day, just in regular lifestyle. And your female form would probably be holding 10, 20 pounds of fat in the lower belly, on the hips, maybe on your bum, and the back of your arms. And it does that as your rainy day fat. That's your survival fat. So if you've been listening to the news or following what's going on in the world or having any amount of empathy and compassion for the people who are really struggling right now, your body will not want to let go of that life insurance. So those 10,000 steps is amazing for your lymphatic fluid, for detoxification, for keeping your heart healthy. But if you really want to shift to the body composition of being less than 25% body fat, your body needs more activity. You have to push your body to tell your body, we can't save this life insurance, I need to burn it. So working with a structure, either working privately with a coach or working in a membership or something like that, where you can see, like something that I'm doing right now with a group of women is we do a fasted walk first thing in the morning. And then we incorporate like 2 very specific supplements and a fat release elixir, which I'll tell you what it is. It's essentially water with raw apple cider vinegar because it has acetic acid. So it helps you to burn ketones when you're fasted. So doing that first thing in the morning. And then we need to incorporate periods of high intensity interval training throughout the day. So having one workout is great, but if you're doing high intensity interval training for a long period of time, your body might get stressed out, especially as a female. But if you're doing shorter periods of high intensity interval training, like 2 periods of 12 minutes, then your body just thinks that you have a lifestyle that means that you need to be burning more energy. So that's going to help you to keep your metabolism high through those periods of the day when you're not active, but also just keeping in mind that you want to be active as often as possible in order to be burning more energy than you are eating. Does that make sense? So maybe being in spring is not ideal for you right now. Maybe sustaining a summer season throughout the week and structuring it so that you are in more of an early summer throughout the day, but right after your workouts, you are having a deeper summer meal or a late summer meal so that your body can convert those carbohydrates into muscle, will actually give you the energy that you need to create the body composition that you want, and your body will still be perceiving abundance.
Okay.
Is that helpful? And then, so if you use summer as your base, then every couple months you could cycle into spring for like 3 weeks at a time and have that be your leaning out if your body is willing to do any leaning out. But otherwise you could be building muscle and therefore increasing your metabolism so your body is more keen on burning the fat that you have in the meantime.
Okay, so I think that I didn't tell you the full story. I realized I haven't been sleeping a lot. And because of WildFit, I don't get I don't feel a lot of adverse effects due to eating well. Because of that. And the reason why is because I'm also doing a PhD program. So I guess I'm compounding a lot of stress on my body that therefore I mean, I should know this. My body's like, dude, you're joking me. You want to release all this fat while you're doing all of this other stuff. So I guess I understand why it won't release fat, but I'm just like, come on, I'm doing so much. Why aren't you doing your part? So I should just be okay with it because I've got a lot on my plate.
What would it feel like if you just loved that fat?
I don't want
Radical
to.
self-acceptance, and you were just like, body, I know I'm going through some stress right now. You're handling it like a champ. You get me up every morning. Brain functions well, heart functions well, everything's doing what it needs to do. I have the capability to do everything that I'm asking you to do. Thank you so much. I understand that you're a little bit insecure because I'm providing you with some uncertainty. However, I trust that you're doing what's best for me.
Oh, okay. I like that. I have been trying to accept it, and I will reframe that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Practice for a week. Let me know how it's going. It's not easy. It's not always easy, especially if we've been telling the brain we want something for a long period of time. When we start to tell the brain we want something else, it starts to short circuit. It's like, what do you mean? That's not true. So we have to look for proof and evidence that that is actually what we want. And then it just becomes our new normal. The more proof and evidence that you can find on a daily basis and really focus on that, this is why I can trust my body. This is why my body is taking care of me. This is how I'm taking care of my body. It'll happen a lot more quickly that you'll shift your mentality to this new set of railroad tracks. So yeah, keep me
Thank
updated
you.
on how it's going.
All right.
Rabab, are you there? I know you had your hand up for a long time. I don't know if you're still there or if you're just listening. I'm going to go over to Rasha next, and then I will get to Francis and Isabel before. Oh, Rabab, I'm going to go over to you because I knew you had your hand up for a long time. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for this amazing presentation. I have a question. Yes, I write it here. Can we release fat, then build the muscles, or can we do both at the same time? Because I have to drop maybe 20 more kilos, and I'm confused. Do I start with releasing fats, or should I build muscles, or I can do both of them at the same time?
Great question. So if you are carrying 20 kilos on your body is always doing weightlifting. You are always doing weight-bearing exercise.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a really great thing. Your body is consistently strength training, which means that as you are trying to release fat, your metabolism will likely be higher because muscle burns more energy than fat does, right? This is why the more fat that we tend to have on our body, the more quickly we're able to release it, because usually we have a lot of very strong muscles underneath it. So
yeah,
yes, you can absolutely do both at the same time. What it might look like is this. Your base season is spring. So you're just always coming back to spring, whether it's, I'm just gonna mute you just in case. So you're always in spring. However, you have your workouts, whether you're doing weight training or you're doing high intensity interval training, or you're doing body strengthening with Pilates or dance class or yoga or whatever you're doing, that is creating strength, right? So not just your regular, like I've got a glisten of sweat on my brow, but like I'm intending to do the type of intentional movement that gets me breathing heavy and I want my muscles to feel sore tomorrow. That kind of exercise and intentional movement. Before that, you want to give your body a little bit of sugar. So you might have a higher quantity of middle foods. You might have the cherry recovery smoothie, which I will drop into the chat here. It's one of my blogs. Can't do two things at once. Okay, so if you have something like this, which I'll give you an example, it has carbohydrates, but it also has protein and it has fat. So it'll give you the sugar which you need in order to have a really powerful workout. And you'll probably burn off all of that sugar through the duration of your workout. So by the time your workout is over, you would be getting ready to go back into fat burning metabolism. But after that workout, within 30 minutes to an hour, I want you to have a meal. And I want that meal to have both protein and middle foods, spring middle foods, which give you carbohydrates. Because now your muscles are tired and all of those fibers are broken. And so they're looking to be rebuilt. So you need to give them carbohydrates, which will carry hydration in the form of water, and protein to rebuild those muscles. So you have that mild spring meal. And then after that meal, you go back into deep spring. So you've created this very, very short seasonal ratio where on the days that you work out, you are in summer for that workout, and then you move back into deep spring. And in this way, you can, for the most of the day, be burning fat, but ensure that you're building muscle when you have your workouts. If you want a better example, make sure that you check out the Creating Your Seasonal Ratios and Food Categories PDF, because in there it gives some great examples of what you might want to be doing if you're building or releasing. Okay. Oh, I've muted you, sorry, because there was feedback. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. So after your answer, I just want to make it clearer with you. Can I go like 3 weeks spring, deep spring, and then 1 week summer, or and during this 1 week I can practice, or?
Okay, so the example I gave you before, you were asking how can you release fat and gain muscle at the same time? So that's what I recommend for that, is these very short seasons where you're in deep spring, and then around your workouts, you are in summer.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
Okay.
if you prefer, you can also have seasons of spring that are longer and then move into summer, but that's not optimal for gaining muscle mass.
Yeah.
You can maintain muscle mass that way, but not gain it.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Ariel.
You're welcome. Rasha. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying and listening to these questions and having the patience to get your questions answered. I want to make sure everyone feels good about their seasons before we leave. Rasha, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ariel, for this wonderful workshop, and everybody else. This is a wonderful group. I'm really learning from everybody's questions, actually. Thank you. I just have a few short questions. First one is, you mentioned about the unsupportive foods. You said that your body obviously reacts when there's an unsupportive food, you get diarrhea or whatever. But I recall distinctly that with when we first started introducing the alkagizers in a 90-day WildFit challenge, my body reacted with diarrhea as well. So the change in diet tends to spur a reaction somehow in the body, or whether that's detox. Could you just explain a little bit, because that's a bit confusing for me.
Of course. So our bodies are really efficient, right? They don't produce anything they don't need. So if you go from eating a lot of sugar to eating no sugar, your body is going to be producing less insulin. It'll likely have a bunch stored in your pancreas, but it's not going to need to be producing it every single day. So then when you switch from spring into summer, if you exceed the amount of sugar that your body has insulin for, you might feel sick because your body's like, what are you, I thought we weren't eating sugar. So then it's like, oh, okay, I'll produce the insulin, but it takes a little bit of time for it to catch up. So your body likes predictability. And what you might find is that if you get into this cadence of your seasons where you're like, around my workouts, I have summer, and then when I'm not working out, I have spring, your body predicts that. So it'll start producing more insulin in accordance for your workout. Or if you're like, I'm trying to release fat, so I'm going to be in spring, but on the weekends, I move into summer, your body will start producing more insulin on Friday. Your body loves a schedule, loves it. It's a type A kind of creature. So the more that we can create that for the body, the less of an opportunity for you to have those spaces where you get ill. And it can also be about the bacteria and the enzymes that those foods are carrying. Because everything that we eat in our body, everything that we eat that's a real food has its own like microbiome that's happening on it and in it. So sometimes if we haven't had interaction with those foods for a while, they surprise the body, especially if your body is quite sensitive. So that might be some of that going on. It might be that your microbiome is not adapted. It might be that you don't have the digestive enzymes. The same thing can happen if we haven't had meat for a while and then we have meat and makes us sick. But then after a couple times of eating it, we can be okay. So your body is very adaptive, but it does not like surprises, is the best way I can put it. So hopefully that gives you some clarity.
Okay, yeah, yes, thank you, definitely. Another question I had was relating to spring and spring versus the typical ketogenic diet. And because I've got this question from friends, they're like, oh, but this is keto, but this is worse than, why don't you just do keto? Because keto is so much, you get the cream and the cheese and the, you know, and then I'm like, and they say, and it's so predictable and you calculate the macros and it's so much more predictable in terms of the amount of weight loss, because I have a lot more weight loss that I need to achieve, weight release to be to use quite correct wild fit terminology. So I'm like, I don't know whether this is the food monster or the sugar monster, or was it, okay, well, should I be doing this and then moving to wild fit after that? So could you just comment on the difference between the ketogenic versus the wild fit spring? I know this is not a diet. This is, I'm trying to push away the diet mentality. I'm very aware that I keep going back to it because I've been on it all my life. I've always been wanting to lose weight. So this is really, really difficult. It's like, oh, but then there's the quick fix. I know the 3 months are over and now I have to, oh my God, what am I going to do? Or can I do something quicker? You know, this is all happening. So maybe you can help me answer myself first so that I can answer them too afterwards.
Of course. First of all, like, you are here, you took the time to attend this workshop, you're actively working to switch your diet mentality. I hope that you can find so much compassion for yourself that you've probably had this programming your whole life and now you're just starting to reverse it in these last 3 months. And it does take time to change our programming. Our brains are stubborn things. So each and every day that you do that little micro correction that you did, and you're like, I'm using this terminology because it's powerful. It's not a diet. I'm not trying to lose this weight. I want to release it and put it behind me. All of those things are helpful. So just continue doing what you're doing. Absolutely. Now, the thing about keto, food devils and sugar monsters both love keto. Food devils love it because it's like, oh, dairy is so creamy and cheese gives me casein protein, which lights up my reward receptors. Like, we get dopamine when we eat casein protein. So your body can get addicted to cheese. And then your sugar monster is like, yeah, give me dairy because at least then it has lactose, and lactose is kind of like sugar. So absolutely, it can give more variety in terms of feeling like you're being very restrictive. But the flip side of that is that a baby cow gains 200 pounds in its first year of life. more than that, a lot more than that. Maybe it's 2,000 pounds. It's a lot. A baby cow goes from being quite small to quite large in its first year. So milk is meant to have you gain weight. And if you look at a baby cow, it's not just all muscle, right? They're hefty creatures. They like to have a good amount of fat stored. So that's what dairy is for. It's for gaining weight. So it doesn't necessarily make sense that you would eat it when you're trying to release fat, especially if it has hormones in it, because those hormones are communicating with your body that you're supposed to be storing fat. So even if you end up releasing fat from certain areas of your body, you might end up showing more cellulite. You might end up getting these weird pockets of fat that stay on your body. Like often you might see women in particular, they end up getting quite slim on keto, but then they have this little pocket of fat that exists underneath their belly button and 2 pockets of fat that are on their hips. And then they really can't get rid of them. They're almost like these gelatinous things that hang off of the body. And that's because all of this dairy is sending these hormonal signals of, cow estrogen to store fat. So there's that. There's also the fact that dairy is very inflammatory in the human body. It makes us create mucus and all manner of other things. And kind of like I was talking about, food has a chemical way of communicating with the body. So milk is coming in, whether it's in the form of cream cheese or regular cheese. What are some of the other ones? Cottage cheese, coffee cream, that are all keto friendly. And they have certain enzymes in them that don't do well with the body, and the body flags them as foreign invaders. And that actually creates this heightened immune response. And then your immune system is on high alert. So as you're detoxifying, because you're releasing fat, at the same time, your immune system is freaking out. So you might get more mucus. You might end up with this long-standing post-nasal drip because you get this biofilm that's created. You might end up with a really funky gut biome, which actually leads to more rashes and eczema and psoriasis in the long term. You might end up with more aches and pains. So, excuse me. I've been talking for a really long time. So, really, when it comes right down to it, milk can give you some variety, but if we're looking at the cost or the benefit, like we don't absorb much of the protein. I don't know if any of you have done this. Anyone who went through WildFit Spring, did you put the minerals in your water?
Yes.
Next time you have a drink of water and you put the trace minerals in it, close your eyes and drink it. It tastes exactly like skim milk. Exactly like skim milk, because skim milk is essentially cow hormones, maybe some pus and other bacteria and whatever Eric talks about, a chalky white color, which is sometimes added in, and then all of these minerals, which are added in as powders. So it's not a real food. It does give some variety, but there's lots of recipes that I can give you that are more supportive. Like, has anyone tried the lemon and thyme ricotta that's made with macadamia nuts? It is so good. I make a bechamel sauce, which is delicious, and you can have it with your keto pasta if you choose to, right? There's all these alternatives. So really it comes down to if there are simple alternatives and you know how to make them or you know where to buy them, why go through the trouble of having all of these milk products? And yeah, maybe it's easier because you have someone who set up a keto plan for you, but wouldn't it be great if you had a WildFit coach that sells a spring program that has a meal plan with all of your macros lined up? Oh wait, you do. So you just need to tap into those WildFit resources to figure out where you can get that same knowledge. And the wonderful thing about WildFit is we're so close knit that if you go into one of our groups, you ask one of the coaches, like, I need these resources. We're going to try to find them for you. So you could have milk, or you could actually get healthy at the same time that you're getting skinny. Just tell your friends to call me. I'll go off on them for like 20 minutes.
I already,
They'll be like, all right, all right, all right. I don't care. I don't want to know anymore.
I already told them to go on the 90-day challenge anyway.
Tell them to try WildFit. We have one starting in 3 weeks. Say, give me 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks and $27.
Yeah.
All right. So we're way over time. So I'm going to go to Francis and then Isabel. Super quick. How's everyone doing with their food categories and their seasonal ratios? Everyone who's still on here, do you have them done? Yes? Okay. Francis. Oh, sorry, I just remuted you.
Okay, thank you. So I did WildFit in 2019 and actually never really did the Living WildFit afterwards because I just didn't really understand how to set my ratios and do the seasons. So I've gained back the weight that I lost, and my sugar monsters come back with a vengeance. I don't want to redo the 90 days, and just wondering what I just need help creating what ratios or seasons would work best for me if I have like 15 pounds that I need to lose again.
Okay. So first thing, isn't it amazing that you now have 2 years of data that can tell you exactly what took you off course? So you now know what happened between the time you went through WildFit and the point you're at now that caused you to regain that weight. So you know the foods that you should probably put below your freedom line, or the foods that you should probably put in the rarely category. You've already done all of this research for your food devil and your sugar monster to say, okay, I know exactly what you're going to say that's going to get me to eat these foods. So I'm definitely not going to listen to you because I know where that went. So let's reframe this and say, yeah, it might have not been the best 2 years in terms of your goals. However, how much better are you going to do now that you're focused and you have a plan? So for you, and I would say anyone who's kind of the same, where it's like you're missing the accountability, you're missing the check-ins, you're missing having people who are supportive of you, the most important thing is to find a community of WildFitters. Find people that you can check in with each and every day, and it just becomes natural and normal. In my VIP membership, as an example, to tell you, one of my clients, her father-in-law is staying with her to get out of India because of everything that's happening right now. And she was feeling so good about herself. And then he said, I don't know why you're bothering to diet. You don't look any different to me. And that's devastating, right? After all of her hard work. And she has made progress. He's just a cranky old man and he can't see it. So wasn't it amazing that she could just go into our WhatsApp group and say, this just happened to me and I'm feeling really bad about it. And immediately 10 women jump in and they not only defend her and have compassion for her and lift her back up, but they can also share experiences of similar things that happened to them. So suddenly my client doesn't feel so alone. And we all need that in our journey, because there's going to be people who don't agree with WildFit. You're going to have friends who think what you're doing is crazy or stupid, or they don't see the point of it, or just have a little bit this time. The WildFit police aren't watching, and it's hard to explain that you're doing it for you because it feels good in your body, because they don't know. They don't have that same experience. So having that community of people, Francis, is what's really going to help you to stay on track above anything else, above any categories that you have, any seasonal ratios that you have, because having them is fabulous. But having people who help you stick to them is really what's going to help with progress. So having spring as a base season, staying in it for a couple of weeks at a time, maybe 2-3 weeks at a time, and then cycling into summer for a week, and then having a few days of fall just spliced in there, even while you're in spring. Maybe after a couple of weeks in spring, you have 2 days in fall, and then you go back into spring. Because if it's summertime where you are and you're like, I can't have peaches. I want peaches. They're only in season for 2 weeks of the year and they're so delicious and I'm missing them. Plan to be in fall and eat the damn peaches, because it's all about abundance and what feels good to our bodies. We want to get away from this diet mentality where we feel like we have to suffer to get results. We want to feel good about what we're doing and we want to celebrate our bodies. So Francis, I would say definitely think about spring as your base season. Pepper in some days of fall when you feel like you have special events coming up or there's foods that you want to eat that are the sweeter fruits or the root vegetables and things like that. And then have some periods of summer that are like a week long after every 4 or so weeks in spring. And that way you can continually make progress, but you're not punishing yourself and you don't feel like there's not abundance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Isabel will be our very last question.
Hello, Ariel, and thank you for taking me. And you know what? It's going to be really short because you've answered my question with the last person, Rasha. Yes. So yeah, just to make sure, I've had the same problem since Christmas. I started to indulge and more, and I regained 10 pounds on the 40 pounds that I had lost. And I was just wondering, okay, what do I do? Where do I start? So spring for 2 or 3 weeks, or even 4. And then I do 1 week of summer and a couple of days of fall, and then I go back to spring for a while anyway, until I get to my goal. And then my ratios, what should they look like? I never did the ratios because I never understood them. So I never cycled around my seasons. I don't see, yeah, I'm not seeing, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reason that we create ratios is just to create a cadence for ourselves so that it's not random. So our body likes everything to flow in cycles. So if you are in summer for the same time each time and in spring for the same time each time, and then you have 2-day periods when you're in fall, then it's predictable. So if you're still looking to release, then you might say, well, spring is my base season. And it might be a mild spring, so including some of those middle foods later in the day. However, moving into summer, I'm assuming you're in the northern hemisphere.
Yes.
Then
way up north.
So then you would say, well, it's only going to be summer for a short period of time, so I want to enjoy the local produce while it's in season. So I'm going to make my summer season line up with the natural summer season. And then sometimes we might say, well, I need to know that when I'm getting too many cravings, I'm going to reset and put myself back in spring, because that's what I'm going to need to stop myself from going off track. So that's how you can just have that sort of ratio, or it can be more natural, and you can choose whichever works best for you.
So if I wanted, I could choose to spend more time in the summer, a little bit less in fall, and then do spring for a while. If I choose the summer as my base season.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I could do like 2 or 3 weeks of summer, 1 week of fall, and a couple of days of spring, or a 3-day fast or something like that.
I would say a 3-day fast. It's tricky to do spring for just a couple of days because it usually takes a couple of days to get into ketosis. So spring, I always recommend that it's at least a week long.
Okay.
And that way you can get in there, get some of the fat burning benefits, and then transition out.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You are so welcome. Thank you everyone for staying for this extended period of time. It's great. I hope everyone had the opportunity to get their categories done and their seasonal ratio done, and that you all got some more insights and what you needed. As a reminder, I'm putting the link to my Facebook group, Living Well with Ariel, into the chat here, so that if you do have follow-up questions and you need to figure out how to get those categories going, or you want to talk about specific foods, you can make use of that group and have some accountability there if you're not sure where else to go. I'm so proud of all of you for making your health a priority and showing up here today and watching this masterclass and participating in it. That is so fabulous. And it was so wonderful to see some familiar faces from the past challenges and some people from a while ago, and even some coaches in this community. So I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care for now. Stay well. Ciao. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye.